Right on. Today I wanted to share a little bit about my story and answer some questions like who am I? And how did I get here? And why should you care? And for the purposes of this story, my story starts in about 2014 when I owned and operated a private personal training and wellness center in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan called FIT. And this was a beautiful place. It was a really cool building. We had an awesome, unique concept. And we had this upstairs mezzanine area that was equipped with a full kitchen where we prepared meals and shakes for our clients. And we had some great clients that we worked with for a really long time. And we had an emphasis on personal development. And actually, what I realized early on was that so oftentimes people would come to me and they'd say things like, well, I've got this problem, I need to lose like 30 pounds, or I got this problem, I need to lose 50 pounds, or whatever it was. And what I learned was that the weight was not necessarily the problem, okay? The weight was usually a symptom of an underlying mental or emotional issue. And when we started to address the mental and the emotional aspect, in many cases that weight just melted off. And I had some clients that lost like 80, 100, even 120 pounds. And it was actually because of that awareness that I was prompted to originally get my life coaching certification back in 2014. And I just saw that as another tool that I could use in my toolkit to help my clients on their weight loss journey. Okay, but like I said, we had an emphasis on personal development. Okay, now from the outside looking in, I was winning. You know, I seemed to have it all. Okay, I mean, I was self-employed. I had the big house up in the north end. We had the pool in the backyard. I had the new car in the driveway. You know, I had the wife, the 2 kids, the dog. We even had like the white picket fence. Okay, and to be honest with you, like I had kind of followed the blueprint that we've been led to believe or we've been sold on. You know, like go to school, get good grades, get a good job, get married, and that sort of thing. And you know, you do all those, and you'll be successful, right? And once you're successful, well, then you'll be happy. It's kind of the story that we're sold, right? Well, I did all of those things, okay? And like on paper, I was successful. You know, on paper, I was winning, okay? But on the inside, I was dying. You know, I was, if I can be real honest with you, I was working all the time. You know, I was stressed out of my mind. I didn't have much time for my family. I rarely saw my wife and kids. You know, I had no time for friends or fun or any of that sort of stuff. Okay, you know, the hours and the stress eventually became like more than I could handle, right? And I tried everything I could think of. I really did. You know, I exercised regularly to help manage some of that stress and anxiety. I read countless books on personal development. You know, this picture was taken, I had a New Year's resolution actually to read more. And that year I read 18 books on personal development. Okay? And there's some good ones in there actually. Ones that I still think about and use today. But I also created a men's group. And it was really rewarding. We built some really lasting and fulfilling relationships that came out of that. We did some really cool, unique activities. Like this was taken up in northern Saskatchewan at a men's retreat that I hosted. And we did a cold plunge, we did some workouts, we did some yoga, we did an archery lesson, we did a hike through the forest, and yeah, it was great. You know, and all of those things, they helped to a certain extent, okay, but I was stuck. I felt trapped, okay, and I was what I call a prisoner of my own success, okay, in the sense that, like, in a way, I was tied to a business that was sucking the life out of me. Okay, I was tied to it legally for sure. Okay, financially, mentally, emotionally, physically. Right. I mean, I owned a brick and mortar business that I had to be at every day, damn near every day anyway. And eventually, it was like the pressure of it began to build, and over time, I started to show cracks. In fact, I was actually hospitalized twice, okay, where I thought I was having a heart attack. And I remember very clearly calling my wife from the floor gym saying, like, hey, something's wrong here. Like, I need you to come pick me up. And we went to the ER, and there was tightness in my chest. My heart rate was through the roof. I had high blood pressure, and like I couldn't catch my breath, like even just going up and down the stairs, which was really unusual. I really did. I thought I was having a heart attack, and they admitted me into the ER, hooked me up to a whole bunch of devices, and it was later determined that it was likely just stress. They say that stress can be a silent killer, and it was definitely beginning to take its toll. Okay, and my solution to that wasn't a very positive one, and I also started drinking more at the time, and that certainly didn't help. It wasn't until much later that I realized that was probably compounding the issue, right? But this went on for a little while until about 2019, when Anna and I sat down and we began to ask ourselves, like, what do we really want? Okay? Not what does society tell us we should have, but what do we want? Okay? And we put pen to paper and we began to make a list of all of the things that were really important to us. And we began to identify some elements that were missing. Okay, and I still have this journal entry, and I was looking at it not too long ago, and it was amazing to see how many of these things have come true since then. Okay, but we started by creating some clarity around what it was that we wanted and what that looked like, and that was the first step, or the starting point. Okay, and then what we began to do is start to make some changes. Okay, and we had decided that we were going to put our house up for sale. All right. We also made the difficult decision of letting go of the gym that I owned and operated. Okay, and we decided that we were going to transition that business online and focus more on the personal development aspect of it, which was actually where my heart was at anyway, and it just made a lot of sense. Okay. And when COVID hit in the spring of 2020, we were actually like 2 weeks away from launching our website and going live. So in some ways, like, the timing couldn't have been better. Okay, but that's not to say that it was all smooth sailing. Okay, in fact, I actually got to the point where I realized that I needed some help. And my drinking had gotten so bad that I had tried to quit, or I tried to cut back, and I just always found that I ended up right back where I started. Okay, and at the beginning of 2020, March 20th, 2020, I finally got to that point where I realized that I needed help. And actually, this photograph, this is super embarrassing to share, and I've never actually shared this with anybody, including my wife, until I put this slide together. But this picture is the last photograph that I have of me drinking. And it's hard to look at. But I'm proud to say that I haven't had a drink since March 20th of 2020, and coming up on about 4 years of sobriety now, which is pretty exciting, because at that time, it seemed like the rest of the world was drinking themselves into oblivion and COVID isolation, and I was making an effort to get sober. Okay, yeah, which is I'm pretty proud of. But I realized that I needed some help, and I couldn't do this all on my own. With the support of friends and family, I also joined a 12-step program, which was super helpful in helping me work through some of those blocks and maintain my sobriety. Okay, and I'm a huge advocate of that. So that was a big change that I made at the time. Another change that I made was I hired a coach. And a mentor of mine, Tony Robbins, one of his lines, I'm a big fan of, it says that success leaves clues, you know. And to me, what that means is that if there's anybody that you know that has what you want, or is doing what you want to do, or has achieved what you want to achieve, like, learn from them, and if you can take similar steps, you're likely to get similar results. And so in the spring of 2020, I hired a coach, and somebody that I learned from. Wasn't the first coach that I've hired, and it also hasn't been the last coach that I've hired. In fact, over the last 6 years or so, I've invested about $100,000 into my personal development in coaches, programs, and workshops alone. And that's not even including the countless books that I have on my bookshelf and things of that nature. But I can honestly tell you that it's because of that investment in myself that's the only reason why I am where I am today, doing what I'm doing and earning what I'm earning. And without that, you know, scares me to think of where I might be. Okay. But yeah, this is a funny one here. So, you know, those were funny times back then. When COVID was taking place, there was a lot of change going on, and I was experiencing somewhat of an identity crisis. You know, I had just closed my business. I had just given up drinking. My family and I had just moved into my mom's basement. Okay, and you know, we had done that because, you know, we had our house up for sale, and at the time the whole thing was, well, that's ride out the curve or flatten the curve or whatever it was. And so our idea was, well, let's hunker down in my mom's basement for 2 weeks to flatten the curve before we move on to our new home. And well, that later became about a year. Okay, but at that time, I was kind of struggling with, like, well, who am I without my business? And how do I fit into the world? And, like, what's my place? And all of those sorts of things. And so this photograph is actually a representation of what I jokingly refer to as my Britney Spears moment, where, you know, I finally got to that point where I took a razor and I just shaved my own head. And I was in a bit of a reinvention phase where I had to let go of a whole lot of things, and I was peeling back the layers and rebuilding myself, so to speak, from the ground up. Okay, and there was a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty, but I had a vision and I had an idea for what I wanted to do, what I wanted to create, who I wanted to become, and how I wanted to do that. And actually, it was about that same time that I went out to my dad's cabin. He owns a property up at Diefenbaker Lake, which is a beautiful spot in southern Saskatchewan. And I locked myself in the cabin and wrote feverishly for about 3 days to create. I drew inspiration from some of the men's group that I had facilitated in the past, some of my personal development background, and some of my expertise in the fitness and wellness industry, and brought it all together to create a masterclass that I wanted to offer to people during lockdown. And I did it virtually over Zoom. And it later became a program that I called Unstuck. And the cool thing about Unstuck is that this program has been offered to people, countless people across Canada and the US, and as far away as Australia and India. And it's been a super successful program that's helped countless people at this point, and something that I'm really proud of. But it's also gone on to inspire spin-off programs, including Momentum Mastermind, Master Your Money Mindset, Let Go to Grow, Success Principles, and most recently, Thrive 360. And so it's just really cool to kind of see, looking back, how all of these things came together the way that they did. Okay? And today, I'll tell you, my life looks completely different than it did even a few short years ago. Okay, my wife and I, we moved our family to Vancouver Island during the pandemic, and actually, you know, that's a story in and of itself. But real quickly, you know, we bought a house sight unseen, okay, in a city that neither of us had ever even been to, and moved our family halfway across the country in the middle of the COVID pandemic, which some people thought was absolutely crazy, okay? And I mean, they might have a point there, but I'll tell you, it has been super rewarding, and we absolutely love it, even more than we had anticipated. But, you know, right now, I'm working less and earning more than I ever have. I get to wake up and do what I love every single day. Both my wife and I work from home, so we see each other all the time. We have the opportunity to walk our kids to school and be there and pick them up when they get out of school at the end of the day. You know, just every single aspect of my life has improved. And I don't say this to impress you. I say this to impress upon you what's possible, okay? And Thrive 360 is designed to help you, show you exactly what I did and how I went from feeling trapped, stuck in a career that was sucking the life out of me, to a point where, you know, I'm thriving in all aspects of my life, okay? Personally, professionally, financially, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And if any of that resonates with you, or you'd like to know how to do the same for yourself, you've come to the right place. So I'm looking forward to connecting with you. I'd certainly like to learn more about you and hear about your story, where you came from, what you've gone through, what you've experienced, and also where you'd like to go and what you'd love to see for yourself. And so I invite you to connect with me and let me know your story. And I look forward to connecting with you soon. Take care.